Hey everybody, this is Talkative Carl back again for another spoiler review. And our beginning the Star Wars massive review showdown here, starting with episode 1, The Phantom Menace. I'm gonna go obviously like the breakdown of the story itself and actors involved and what have you. Then I have notes here that I took down and stuff that I personally spring to mind, that most of which has probably been said, but something I pulled from personally that I gleaned from my viewing, because it's been a while since I went back to a lot of these films, and it's fun to revisit. And it's weird now that back in the day, well, still not very liked, but I think we understand it thanks to the Clone Wars series. I think we have like a better understanding and a better appreciation, especially after Rise of Skywalker, and it's like, and to some extent, Last Jedi. The prequels kind of like, at the very least, I just want to say this right now. I might repeat it when I get to the sequel trilogy, but the difference between the prequels and the sequels trilogies is that at least George Lucas, when he was handling the prequels, at least it was, had like a narrative from start to finish, while the sequel trilogy, because one director did one thing and then he has to back out because for the second one, because of obligations to another film, somebody else took the reins, they took it in a whole nother direction, it was way off the rails, then the previous director came back to do the third one, and it's like it went up and down. So that's like the bulk of the, I won't say like the bulk of it, but like a good chunk of the reason why, the sequel trilogy isn't as solid as it should have been. But anyway, episode 1, obviously it begins with the opening crawl about trade blockades and all this political stuff with Naboo and the Trade Federation, and trying to capture Queen Amidala to sign treaties, force her to sign a treaty, and all this other stuff, which is against her wishes. So the Chancellor at the time sent 2 Jedi, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn, played by Ewan McGregor and Liam Neeson. Little did we know at that time how big Ewan McGregor is going to be, because that was the first time I actually seen Ewan McGregor in anything. I'm pretty sure he's been in other stuff prior to this, because man, this dude can act, and I love Ewan McGregor. And it's just his voice is just, it's like, I just like listening to his voice. It's like a very very sultry, just great, voice. It's like, not on the level of Morgan Freeman, but it's up there. Yeah, he's been in quite a few stuff now that I've seen before, because his first on-screen role was Being Human in 1994. I don't know about this other handful of stuff prior to episode 1, but personally, I think episode 1 was his big breakout role, because honestly, ask anybody, out of all the actors in the prequel trilogy, he was the gold star by far. Everybody, obviously, all the other actors are phenomenal in their own right, obviously. But with George Lucas at the helm, he did not bring out, because they tried as they might, they did the best that they could, but it's just, there are certain things that George Lucas could not do, and that is a damn shame. But of course, anyway, you know, I want to stress these particular uh, these guys, these Trade Federation viceroys, New Gunray, uh, obviously there's quite a few racially insensitive aliens in the prequel trilogy. I just want to point it out there. It's fairly obvious, and it's, I did not know it. I mean, well, these viceroys is very obvious. It took me like a minute before I got clued in with the slaver Watto. So yeah, very problematic at the time. Glad it wasn't ever repeated. But well, like these negotiations they was trying to do fell through. They, some droids trying to attack them. They split up to hitch ride on these airships or spaceships to take them onto the planet Naboo. And while Qui-Gon was heading, try to run off to say space to meet up with Obi-Wan, he bumps into Jar Jar Binks. I will get to him in a minute because there's quite a bit to say about him. He meets up with Kenobi. Jar Jar takes him to his underwater city of Gungan City, even though he was exiled for being clumsy. They convince the leader to take Jar Jar with him because he owes Qui-Gon a life debt, and they take like a underwater craft to the capital city of Naboo to help the Queen escape capture, which they do, and they had to they try to escape back to Coruscant, but in the ensuing battle, their ship gets damaged, so they have to make a pit stop at Tatooine. So Padme, in disguise as a handmaiden, goes with Qui-Gon and of course R2-D2, who helped get them as far as to Tatooine, despite the damage that they took from the escape, along with Jar Jar to the city in Naboo and Mos Eisley, where they bump into a young Anakin Skywalker, played by what's his name, Jake Lloyd, which unfortunately Jake Lloyd has his fat issues over the years. So it's just like, it's a damn shame. Like sometimes Hollywood really spits you up, chew you up and spit you out kind of thing. But this dude really, I think he's doing better now. But it's like, man, he, man, he was one of those kids that you thought had like a promising career ahead of them, because he was in like Jingle All the Way, and this was like the two biggest things he was in. And man, it is a shame. I think a lot of the fellow actors probably look upon this kid as like, damn, this is like a shame what happened to that kid. But of course, you get that first George Lucas line, "Are you an angel?" But okay, hear me out. I don't think I had this written down in my notes. Yes, it's fucked up dialogue. I want to say fucked up, but just like crappy dialogue. But I argue that establishes, because like I guess I think George was trying to do this whole love at first sight kind of thing. She's probably arguably like 15 and he's like what, 10 at best. it's just like odd because like it's more like a older sister, little brother vibes. Even though it's fucking Star Wars, like who fuck matters with like you having Leia and Luke kissing each other. And it's like who the fuck cares at this point? But I'm just saying it's like it's kind of odd. But anyway, establishing like a love at first sight kind of deal. So, and of course, the kid was a slave boy. I don't think he had that much experience, as you can see in the sequel once we get there. How like he he gets to that phase of starting to take an interest in girls, but he doesn't know how to properly handle those emotions or like talk to the girl properly and what have you. So he's seeing her like wow, this is the most beautiful woman I've seen on this planet, and he's smitten immediately. But it's just like the dialogue did not express that and was not fair to the kid. And I think a large part of this is Lucas's fault, and Lucas could have benefited from taking some notes from other writers, or at the very least, because I think a lot of actors at that time did not want to tell Sir George Lucas what to do about his own properties, so they kept their mouths shut. So I think that was a detriment too, because actors should be able to voice certain opinions about certain characters, in my opinion. At least maybe not try to completely overhaul everything, like like you're Edward Norton or something, but at least be allowed to give your 2 cents on certain things that did not sound like it flowed well. Personally, that's what I think. So, well, Qui-Gon is trying to, establish some kind of deal with trying to get the parts that they need to fix their ship. They don't have the money that, Waddle needs. Now, then, of course, like, Jar Jar Binks getting a tussle with this pod race, big time pod racer alien, and Anakin steps in, but then gives gives them the idea about like, well, because of the sandstorm coming, they bring it into Smee, Anakin's mother, and while they're having dinner there trying to weather the storm, Qui-Gon already getting like a sense something about this kid that his sense with the Force is like extremely high. I mean, yes, midichlorians, shitty inclusion to this canon, but we'll get to that in a minute. But Qui-Gon believes this is the Jedi prophecy's chosen one that's supposed to bring balance to the Force. Given the fact that his, midichlorian count or just Force abilities is extremely high, even higher than yet of Yoda, the most powerful among them. And Anakin, proposes that, they take a bet on him to win in the pod racing the next day. So, they can win the parts that they need to get off the off the planet. Smee later regales Qui-Gon about like her immaculate conception of Anakin. Now this is a Jesus allegory kind of situation. It's kind of dumb, but it's like obviously it's about like the Force needing balance to the Force, willing someone like Anakin into existence. Now mind you, this holds weight. Now, yeah, it could have easily be like a mysterious person that we never know, that, Smee ran 2 years ago, had like a one-night stand he left under mysterious circumstances. She was pregnant, had Anakin. That could have been that, but then again, people want to know who's Anakin's dad, kind of situation, and it'll be a whole thing. I, you know, as devil's advocate, say that this could hold the whole Jesus allegory holds weight, because there's a lot of, like, Superman is another Jesus allegory, but Anakin's conception could be similar to how, if you know a significant amount, like, Bible stories, you should know about prior to Mary and Joseph, but long after, like, Noah and Moses. Well, I think time of Moses, where it's like where the Israelites wanted a king for themselves, like other kingdoms, but many times they've been told how, like, many of these other kings falter as they're human. They are succumb to temptation and sin. It's very easy for that to happen, and they become corrupt. But God eventually obliges and tries to make other disciples the king, like John, not John the Baptist, but like God, like Moses, and then like what was it, that kid to defeat that giant with that slingshot, David and Goliath. David was another one. After he defeated Goliath, he became king. Then, like, the prior leader, when he was a kid before he defeated that giant, he was like anointed and stuff like that. And it's like, and each one of them at some point eventually faltered. They weren't bad, but it's just that these, like David, for example, pretty much, like, slept with one of his, generals' wives, and then got her pregnant. And it's just like, because of all these, like, good people, but their shortcomings, they needed somebody who was, like, truly incorruptible kind of situation, which is kind of funny given how Anakin later on in life, what led to his downfall. But it's like, because God impregnated Mary, so he kind of like, just like, the Force. It's like they will somebody who, will have, like, the skills necessary, and skill, the power, and, like, the know-how necessary to bring balance to the Force. They have to will someone like that into existence, because nobody, no living creature prior to Anakin, no matter how good or powerful they are, they just did not measure up to some extent. Even Yoda, as good as he is, and as powerful he is, and as wise as he is, even he, like, gets caught up by the dark side, or even was tempted at least one point or another. Even he isn't, like, up to the challenge. Ultimately, it is Anakin. Even though he faltered a good chunk of the way through, he ultimately was the one who did it. So I surmise, yes. I think, like, the whole Immaculate Conception kind of holds water. Was it needed? Maybe not. But, I could see where George Lucas was coming from. At least that's my interpretation. Anyway, so awesome pod racing. Even though the famed racer tried to cheat, but ultimately cheaters never prosper, so he got his ass handed to him. Anakin won the race, and everybody got the parts that they need. Also, Qui-Gon, negotiated the release of Anakin into his care, or at least be free from slavery. Uh, which is another thing like I didn't write down, but it's like another good point because a lot of people pointed out, and I don't think they remember this dialogue from Padme. Is the fact that as futuristic as this world is, it's weird there's slavery at all, and Smee and Padme brings it up, and Smee points out to her that the Republic doesn't reach this far out here. So pretty much anything goes down this way. And you would think Tatooine's, isn't that, because you see in later Star Wars stuff that the Empire reaches far out there as much as they want. Because you see stormtroopers here and there. But it was just wild to me. Yeah. So they did address the slavery issue and why that is still a thing. Anakin's, also we get to see the proto C-3PO, and the scene like the R2 and C-3PO meeting for the first time is very charming, cool, nice little origin story for them of their meeting. But Anakin, of course, is disappointed that he's leaving his mother behind, but he promised he will come back for her. And there's a certain moments that despite certain crappy dialogue, you get to see that certain dialogues that he did say, despite the delivery, kind of breaks your heart, knowing I want to see every. I want to visit every part of the galaxy, which we know he does, but not for the same reason you think. He wants to be the most powerful Jedi, and he will, just not the way he thinks. It's just God. It's just it's kind of like Jason Todd from the Batman lore, where it's his second Robin, and you feel all these hopes and for the future, and he was honestly after Dick grew up, did his own thing, got the Robin mantle into the Nightwing mantle, and now Jason Todd is hopeful young kid. Things is all right in the world with Batman. Got his Batman Robin duo going on until Bruce realized how angry this kid is, and as he grew up, it's he's going too far in his takedown of bad guys and everything like that, and it's it's just on that kind of level. It's just there's a certain turning point, and it's the same with Kenobi as well as Batman. They did not see, or at least they did not want to see, the issues that their respective mentees were experiencing. So you also get the introduction of Darth Maul for the first time, and we didn't even realize, as cool as this guy looked, we didn't not realize how pivotal this character was going to be throughout the overall Star Wars canon. He was arguably one of the most beloved characters in this universe, especially after people are so glad that they brought this guy back, but with robotic legs. He should have died from, well, I was about to say blood loss, but because how hot the lightsabers are, they can easily cauterize the wound. But still, though, being cut in half and then fall from an elevator shaft. But I'm pretty sure we'll get to all that with Clone Wars series. But man, it was gangbusters. Then the Duel of Fate song, man. To this day, the Duel of Fate song is probably ranked pretty high as far as Star Wars, musical scores. Qui-Gon dukes it out with Darth Maul on Tatooine, but makes his escape on their ship and takes off. back to Coruscant. And this is the first time in a long time, in millennia, that anybody has encountered a Sith Lord. So, or at least a Sith in general, because they're supposed to have been died out, but obviously that wasn't the case. He brings that information to the council, and he also brings up about how, like, how powerful Anakin is with the Force. They test him, but Yoda's, reading, the fear in the kid. Fear leads to anger, and anger leads to hate. Anger leads to suffering. Hate leads to suffering, which is pretty apt. Fear, you see, like in the sequel, like fear his mother dying, he's angry about it. He can't do nothing about it or do anything to prevent it. Anger leads to hate, hating the Tusken Raiders of what they did, and that turns to suffering for him, but also major suffering for the Tuskens that's in that village right there and there, just massacring everybody. Well, we'll get to that in the sequel, but I just love the there's certain moments where the snottiness from that little kid is apt, because it's like there's a little tinges of like a chip on that kid's shoulder that you can read. Yeah, it's like, what's that got to do with anything? It's like I see your Vader poking out, kid, and it's like the little moments, little spurts of like just resistance and like just overall like temperament from this kid. It's like how he's easily angered. He usually keeps like a cool head, but it's like when you press that right button, that Vader does come out. But anyway, the council decree that they're not going to allow Qui-Gon to take on another apprentice, especially after he still has an apprentice, but Qui-Gon, probably the only slight against Qui-Gon, because I love Qui-Gon through and through, but this is probably the only slip I have against him, is where he's like, kudos to him for believing in Kenobi. He's strong enough to take on the Jedi trials to become a Jedi master himself. But I think he was too much in a rush to take on this pupil, not realizing that Kenobi probably got like one or two steps to take before he's supposedly ready for these trials, which I don't know if he ever took. They just kind of, you later see like they kind of forced on or just gave him the title given the certain circumstance. I could be wrong. Maybe it's some kind of like comic or like book or something behind the scenes to where he did take those trials and just narrowly passed. Then of course you got like more Trey stuff, but then like with the, well, I got it in my notes, but this whole like relieving the previous chancellor of his powers, thinking like he's being, because thanks to Palpatine, obviously who he is, kind of manipulating the situation behind the scenes just to get Padme to force the previous chancellor out so he can step up to the plate and use his influence to influence the vote in his favor so he can be Supreme Chancellor. Just another stepping stone into his rise of power. So she decides to go back to Naboo because knowing that her people are dying and suffering at the hands of the Trade Federation, she'd rather go down with a ship than hide away like a coward. Kind of honorable. You get to see certain, where Princess Leia get it from watching stuff. Kudos to Natalie Portman. But then they go to Naboo and meet with the Gungans let them know that we need your help. Well, I know we had our issues in the past, but these trade federations will disrupt everything that we hold dear. Will not only hurt us, but hurt you as well. So they form an alliance, and they stop like trade federations machines, while simultaneously, Padme and her group of soldiers go stop the Viceroy. Um, Anakin's in a ship, a little mini ship, taking on robots inside the Federation's little space station thing, blowing it up from the inside out. At the same time, while Qui-Gon and Kenobi is taking on Darth Maul, which is the first time in a long time, or at least the first time ever, I should say, that we get to see a very unique lightsaber in the Star Wars universe, where you see a dual-bladed lightsaber. That blew everybody's. I still to this day remember the trailer when that popped up. Everybody lost their minds. I thought that because when I was a little kid, my father showed me the original trilogy while it was airing on TV, and I love the Star Wars universe since then. And it's certain because he's seen the film quite a few times. It's like the few nerdy things my father knows about, because he's not super into nerd culture, but the few things he does like Star Wars being one of them. He's not super deep cut about it, but he knows his handful, so he knows certain things, at least as far as at least the movies are concerned. Because I think he at least saw he saw the original trilogy quite a few times, but as far as the prequels and the sequels, I think he watched them at least a couple of times, with various degrees of enjoyment. But I'm glad he never because there's certain things he won't be hey, focus on this thing, especially you find out the relationship between Luke and Darth Vader. It's you pay attention to this, and I was what? It's just pay attention to this, listen. And it's and I get this famous iconic spoiler. I'm not gonna say here because it's one of those things where it's you do not want to spoil certain special things. You cannot spoil. Even it's not unlike it's not the same thing as Sixth Sense or crap. What's the one with you find out what Rosebud is. If you ever seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But it's not on the same level as those things. By and large, nobody really ultimately cares. It's not on the same level as Star Wars. This is the kind of thing you do not want spoiled. So since then, I was so geeked to go see my first Star Wars movie in the theater because I never saw it. I wasn't alive when the original trilogy came out. So I was excited to go see each one of these prequel trilogies in the theaters. Despite fluctuating feelings after I saw all three, I can never say I wasn't satisfied in some shape or form. But we all saw the faults, kind of glaring faults. But man, that Duel of Fates hit, that fight between these three, oh man, it was stunning. It was everything. It was oh God. And still, after all these years, still hits just right. So, and I like this, because it did take me by surprise. I think a lot of people take it by surprise as we see those energy walls pull up and pull down randomly. Well, not randomly, but it's in a timer. And they all split in different sections, and it's you can tell the mentality of each one of these three in this exact moment. Kenobi, uh, at the ready to like get to the next level to help out his master. Qui-Gon, just completely zen, meditating, just being in the moment. It's just like, letting the Force, go through him, just like, just waiting patiently, not letting his emotions control him. And you got Maul, whose anger and like affinity to the Force is just like completely taking over him. So he's not only at the ready to like cut anybody down, but he's just like full on beast mode at this point. He's just like chomping at the bit like a bulldog ready to snap. But then the walls pull away from between Qui-Gon and Maul. They duke it out one-on-one. Fortunately, Qui-Gon gets mortally wounded. Then now they're waiting on the wall to go down between Kenobi and Maul. And then once the wall goes down, despite, the sorrow he's feeling about what happened to his master in front of him, he managed to stay collected enough to handle Maul. And of course, at a moment, the Maul gets like the one up on Kenobi, and with like a sweet move, Kenobi like does like a force flip, force grabs Qui-Gon's saber and cuts Maul in half, and he falls down the ventilation shaft. And so the Viceroys get arrested. Peace are declared between the Gungas and the Naboo people. And just like each one of these endings to the prequel trilogy like always end on like a bittersweet moment. And I got to give kudos to that, because we know where this is going to lead to. And it's like this bittersweet moment where it's like, Yoda and the council is not like gonna not allow like the dying wish of Qui-Gon to go unheeded. He wants the boy train, and he wants Kenobi to be the one to do it. So they grant him that, despite their protest. And it's like they're half right. I think I got my notes about them being half right about the situation between they're cut by the dark side, so they don't know fully. But what they are aware of is something, despite the power that's coming through this kid, there's also great potential to be pulled to the dark side, which he does eventually do, or at least the fear that's emanating from this kid, which they don't, I'll get to it in a moment, but it's like, if it wasn't for the Jedi's stagnation in this time frame, their ability to see through the Force wouldn't be diminished, and they'll see like the traitor in their midst, and they'll see the potential Anakin has above that can easily rise above any fear he has. And they should learn to embrace all your emotions, but just learn how to manage it properly, because you're suppressing it leads to this kid popping at a certain point. I got my notes here that I want to point out here, because there's something that stuck out. I did not want to forget anything that kind of really stuck out for me, and I was afraid I was going to forget. So one of these things here, Palpatine, almost in any shot he's in throughout the prequel trilogy, kind of foreshadowing his dark nature into Sidious, or him being Sidious, is that he's almost always in shadow, almost in every scene he's in, which is so fun, especially when the first time you see him in this film, he's completely drenched in, not completely drenched, but he's in shadow. And it's because maybe it's me, but that's a certain kind of cool factor that I took note. Like, he's in shadow already. It's like it's barely barely anytime you see this guy in any light. Uh, the midichlorians, yes, they're stupid as hell. There was no need for them. Lucas trying to add some kind of scientificness to something that's supposed to be in like a Zen spiritual kind of thing, and you're trying to bog it down with trying to make it make sense, and it doesn't need to have any kind of sense to it. Yeah, Kenobi and Qui-Gon are just fantastic. These two, banter back and forth, the mentor-mentee mentality, you just like, but you can tell that Kenobi's way of thinking is like, because, well, Qui-Gon, you can see like the gray Jedi, and which they still have not included the gray Jedi into the Star Wars canon yet. But I think like Qui-Gon was the first on-screen gray Jedi, that we got, because he was willing to question the council, and he wasn't stagnant in their way of thinking like the rest of them are. He's always at odds with them. He wasn't, being pulled to the dark side, but he wasn't like ignoring certain issues. Like, he was willing to step in when needed. He's like I say, he's questioning certain things that they do. That's why Kenobi pointed out, like, you would have been on the council already if he wasn't like so at odds with them. And it's like, I'm where I needed to be. It's like, like with Qui-Gon, he would not, unlike Kenobi, he would allow Anakin to embrace certain feelings, but then teach him how to manage it. It's like the one positive thing about the dark side that it was never like addressed in, at least in the at least maybe in the live action films. I don't know about the TV series, any of the TV series, but the dark side allowed to embrace their emotions, but they just let it run wild, and to the point where they get like tempted to the dark side. Qui-Gon is one of the few Jedi's that allow like their feelings, they embrace their feelings and not suppress it, but just control it. So it was just acting like a normal human being, not like a robot and not like a wild animal. And Kenobi, he's like, he's following, Qui-Gon's lead because, it's his master and he knows his stuff. And he I won't say he works with the ground the guy walks on, but he's like, it's like you can see like Anakin and Kenobi look upon Qui-Gon as like a father figure, like a cool father figure that tells it like it is, but it won't lead them astray. And Kenobi, he's just like, on the one hand, he listens to Qui-Gon, but he's stuck in like the other side with Yoda and the stagnant ways of like he's just like a rule, like like not a rule breaker. What's like opposite of rule breaker? But it's like he's a stickler to the rules, like Yoda. And is that kind of like floppy kind of like made him not as good of a master as he could have been. Not like he wasn't good, but he's just like, he could have been a whole lot better, especially when he's trying to mentor Anakin. Mention that. Yeah. For me, it's the Mandela effect, but for the longest time, I thought Maul never spoke in this film, and not until we saw in like the Clone Wars series. But no, he actually speaks a little bit. He has like a few speaking lines. It's only a few, but he does have a few speaking lines in this film, but with Sidious, but not with anybody else. Oh, Jar Jar. I want to point this out. I get the reason why Jar Jar Binks was created. Now I feel he's his voice is like a chalkboard scratching up against another chalkboard. And I feel bad for the actor for Jar Jar Binks because it has shitty this role been and how much this character to this day still is hated after all this time since 1999. It's still the most hated part of Star Wars. And because of that, it's like the actor, I don't know if he got much roles for a while. I'm pretty sure he's been working, but I think for a good chunk of period after this movie came out, he has been like, or at least after the prequel trilogy ended, well, we didn't even see him at all until like the last bit towards the end of the third film. And he only showed up at least a couple of times in the Clone Wars movie, showing that because like the backlash Lucas got from Phantom Menace, he downplayed Jar Jar heavily, which is nice to see. Like directors listen to the fans, every once in a while. But I could see his line of thinking on why he was, because obviously a lot of these prequel trilogies, a lot of these are just toys he was trying to sell. But he wanted Jar Jar to appeal to kids. And it's like one of those things that you see in a lot of kids' films where it's like, you got that slapsticky, kind of like the snowman from Frozen. I can, of course, this is long before that concept of Frozen ever was created, but you get my meaning. Olaf, I think that snowman's name was. He's trying to make his Olaf with Jar Jar Binks. But as annoyed I am with Olaf, he is not as annoying, nowhere near annoying as Jar Jar Binks. But he is annoying. And he is goofy looking, but not as goofy looking as Jar Jar. And it's not in a good way either. Jar Jar's appearance is completely out of whack. I don't know why nobody told George to go back to the drawing board or at least reconsider this take on a supposed character. He's supposed to have been fun for kids, but I don't think any kids, I was a kid, technically at that time, and I didn't find that visually appealing to look at this guy, let alone hear him. But there's been other rumors that Jar Jar's whole antics was just an act, and he's like another dark Sith character behind the scenes that even manipulated Palpatine to a certain extent, which I personally doubt. It'd be fun for somebody to run with that and turn it into a twist and blow everybody's socks off with that, which I think it could be done. I wouldn't be opposed to that. But as it stands right now, the design of the character was just odd looking. It wasn't fun. It was ugly. And then you top it all off with going with a voice for that character that is just like a tapeworm digging into your ear every time he speaks. And you could have gone with, I know you want to go with a silly voice for a silly character, but there's been plenty of silly characters that worked fine because the benefit they had was maybe not the voice actor. I'm pretty sure the voice actor did other work that did well, but maybe have the character be visually appealing so that way we can at least stomach the voice. But they didn't go with that either. And it's just, Lucas dropped the ball probably very hard on this character, more so than anything else going on in his prequel trilogy. The voice, the antics, the slapstick, all that slapsticky stuff could have worked for almost any other character, but it just did not fit for the, any idea for like not only a Star Wars, you get a lot of better slapsticky stuff from other characters, but it's like this one, it's just bordering on Three Stooges level of stuff that does not freaking work. And it's like, it was you can't help but skip past a lot of Jar Jar stuff. It was that bad. You cannot even stomach that. Or at least you walk out of the room for a brief moment to get you a drink of water or something, because you can just use that moment as a bathroom break, because anytime he's on screen, you don't even care. It doesn't feed to the overall narrative whatsoever, aside from being like the catalyst for certain conveniences going on that led to meeting Qui-Gon, led to meeting the other Gungan race to get a pod to get to the capital to rescue Padme, and so on and so forth. There's a moment when like Smee called Anakin Ann. I get you trying to shorten the kid's name, but it's already relatively short. And it's like, Ann. It's like, it's a weird, odd thing to include. Then again, that's like a short list of like, I'll say it was on like a bottom of the long list of odd dialogue in this film. But I thought, I was like, wow, I never even noticed. I don't even think I remember. Like, oh, she called him Ann? She's never said that ever. And like, never said that since. And it was, wow, that is just pitiful. There's a video that I like return to every once in a while that I thoroughly enjoyed. I forgot what it's called, but it's basically talking about how like we get like Maul, Grievous, and Count Dooku, all like mirror versions, crack mirror aspects of what we get with Darth Vader. Now, I might bring this up again with like the Clone Wars movie and the Revenge of the Sith down the line, but Maul seems like the raw power of the Force and the unbridled anger part of him represented in physical form, while Dooku's the slick politician and negotiator of Vader's aspect. And Grievous is like the robotic, intimidating presence of the aspect of Vader. And it's just like a lot of these things are seeds to bigger stuff that we'll see in the greater schemes of the Star Wars mythology, especially the original trilogy. And I thought that was pretty cool. Like, I recall to that every time I see these three, and it just like informs like, wow, this is like, and you get to see a moment where like, Palpatine sees young Anakin and he makes a comment like, I'm looking forward to see your progress, in the upcoming days, blah, 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 something like that. And it's like, yeah. And Qui-Gon like did mention, last thing here, like Qui-Gon did mention that Anakin will bring balance to the Force. Technically, he's right. He will bring balance to the Force. Won't happen until very much later in his life. Not before he caused all kinds of death and destruction in his wake during his adult life. And it's just like it just feeds in the overall tragicness of the character of Anakin Skywalker. It's still like one of the saddest downfalls of a hero in movie history. All things that led up to what he ultimately becomes. And part of the most, if I play Jedi Fallen Order and you see, and then you see in like a Rogue One, and it's like just the overall just And then even in like the Rebels and and Rebels, the just the ferocity, the power, the intimidation, just the sheer force of nature that is Vader. Is like Anakin is already the most powerfulest Jedi that is recorded, and he's just like a monstrous machine on top of that, working for the enemy, and he's just like a sheer, like a horror movie villain, like a slasher villain, and he just cut a bloody path, and there's no F's given. That is just like scare. Like it wasn't until Rogue One where I understood what people said when they saw Vader for the first time in the theaters during the original trilogy, talking about how scary this guy was. And I did not understand until I saw Rogue One, where he just like mowed down a lot of people, just like he didn't even have to run. He just casually walks and just cut a bloody path. If it was rated R, there would have been blood and guts all over that hallway. But man, this is like a phenomenal. That was phenomenal. But that is my review for Phantom Menace. There's still stuff I like about this. There's certain points that I brought out is what really kind of elevated this movie. Yes, the stilted dialogue is still bad. It's still prevalent in all three of these films, but it gets progressively less as you get to Revenge of the Sith. The midichlorians thing wasn't needed. The Jesus allegory I don't think was needed. Jar Jar Binks was god awful, but I still think they could at least do something with him to kind of redeem the character in some kind of way. Maybe alter his look slightly, give him a different voice, and maybe make him turn out to be like an ultimate bad guy that was just pretending. That would be unique. That would be like a what the F moment of all what the F moments, in my opinion. But let me know what you think about Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. If you've seen it recently or if it's still fresh in your mind, do you agree with my thoughts? Do you disagree, or is there something you want to add? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you guys a little bit for next time when I'm doing a review for the Clone Wars movie. See you later.